Hello. He sat down on a willow stump and stared at the river as intently as if it held a secret for him that at all costs must be drawn forth. At what point, since he stood up by Mr. Evans's side in that queer basement of old Jones's shop, had the determination seized upon him to come out here? Was it when he was looking at that surprising volume? He could envision its dirty, whitish, modern binding now, that fell across the gap in the shelf left by the extraction of St. Augustine? Was it when he was looking for that fairy cup, moss, by the log on which the three of them had sat down? Was it at that very moment when he had that sudden inspiration about the secret of Christianity and the redemption of matter? The willow stump on which he sat now had one living sprout, and from the sprout a little cluster of emerald green buds had burst forth. These buds now became a portion of what he was feeling and thinking. One conclusion certainly had formulated itself in its slowly moving mind, his moving mind, during that ascent of the tour. The conclusion, namely, that it was unnecessary to trouble himself one way or the other about his father's creed, since the essence of the thing lay in the conduct of life rather than any intellectual doctrine. So she said you had the look of a saint. What a funny remark that was of Red Robinson's, and how hard to associate it with any impression he had ever received from Crummy Beard. Well, the look of a saint of the look of a satyr, he knew what he could not help doing now. For good or for evil, he must see Nell Zoyland that day. He got up from the willow stump, crossed a bridge, and began tramping westward along the opposite bank, which, at the portion of a river's progress, resembled a natural towpath. Sorry, I got a hard candy in here. When John and his Welsh companion came about on their tea shop on George Street, they encountered Tom Barter. John had taken the opportunity of carrying further his sudden inspiration as to using my good Fred Evans at the central figure of his profane passion play. The idea of this appealed to a vein of sheer devilry in his impulsive nature. The less there appeared of the Christ-like in the degenerate Roman physiognomy of his Celtic ally, the better pleased and the more tickled did the nerve of roguery in him become. Having agreed to the wild scheme of his second manner, the Welsh one was now prepared, it seemed, to throw into the notion of all the ponderous, pedantic weights of his first manner. And the more he talked about it with John, the fuller of dramatic possibilities did the plan seem for John's lively imagination. But Mr. Evans went off to his shop now, and the two old friends of the far-off Noltwall days were left together in that drowsy Glastonbury street. It came back to John as he drifted by his friend's side towards the office of Philip's factory, how full of this man's personality every glittering, rippling reach of that big river had been. It came back to him now how he had thought of Tom as he stood with Mary at the mill pond looking at those great salmon trout. Oh, remember that back in those days? Oof, that was the very beginning of the book. It came to him how he had recalled without realization the full import of it, their vicious play that hot Sunday afternoon at the bottom of the boat. Vicious with every sort of East Anglican sensuality had they both been. And John was surprised at himself, glancing furtively at Tom's stolid profile, to find what an intense thrill it still gave him, what a delicious, voluptuous sensation, to feel himself weak and soft, where Tom was strong and hard. Ooh. Their way took them. John knew he ought to return to his office, but he simply could not tear himself away from his friend, past some of the worst of the Glastonbury slums. These were altogether minor slums compared to what these of any other big city. But such as they were not a pretty sight. Here in these back alleys lived the failures of the merciless struggle of life. At this present moment, many of the people who lived in these houses were men and women who would have found employment in Philip Crow's factories had been working full time. The sight of the two leisurely men, both of them absolutely sure of 2 more pleasant meals that day, and of good clean sheets and a quiet bedroom to sleep in. When the day was over, strolling past did not enhance the peace of mind of such dwellers in looped and widowed raggedness as chanced to watch them go by. They had scarcely got past this quarter when they were hailed from behind, and in turning round found Dave Spear hurrying about them. Dave's cheeks were less rosy than usual, and there was a dangerous glint in his eye. "Do you mind if I walk with you a step or two?" he gasped, painting a little like a dog that had been overtaxed. "I'm always glad to see you, Spear," said John. "You know Mr. Barter, of course." "Why I trouble you, Crow," said Dave, when he had nodded gravely at Tom Barter, and they had both moved on together, "was that I've just been reading some of your circulars. They're very good, man. They're top-notch in the way, let me tell you. And I'm a connoisseur, being a communist, of the art of propaganda." "I'm glad you like him," said John, mightily pleased at the unexpected praise from so experienced an expert. What we want you to do, it was not clear to John whether this "we" referred to Persephone or the Bristol headquarters, is to mention in your circulars that in addition to her other interests, your town here is going to try the experiment of running a municipal factory. You might mention it as an important experiment in the economic life of this town and suggest that visitors come to see it. John's eyes gleamed with malicious delight at hearing these words. "Certainly, certainly, certainly," he cried eagerly. "I'll have what you say printed in my new set when I'm getting out next week." "Would it be a Philistine thing, Mr. Spear," said Tom Barter in a casual and supercilious tone, "if I inquired where this municipal factory of yours is?" "We'll have it in working order by the time, Mr. Garrett's visitors are really there. You'll know when it is then, Mr. Barter." John looked a little glum at this remark. "At first we did think of June the 1st, he said, "but we decided it would be better to have more time to prepare. I'm in favor, for reasons of my own, of St. John's Day." They came in sight of the factory where Barter's office was. There was a wooden gate leading up to a narrow lane between high walls there, which was the access to the laborers usually employed by the Norfolk manager of a Somerset Mills. The other leaned over this gate with him for a moment out of politeness, for he didn't wish them to come out any further. It was a very wretched house adjoining the gate, an old house, probably built during the Wars of the Roses, for its stone buttresses and lintels still carried deeply cut Gothic foliations, and its crumbling walls were thick as those of a castle. But its rafters were rotting, its thatch dilapidated and full of holes, its broken panes stuffed with rags, and so many bricks were missing from the top of its chimney that one interior side, covered with black soot, was open to the air. Out of the interior of this house there emerged an equal interval of low moaning sound, a sound that had something in it that was peculiarly disconcerting. "Hear that?" said Barter, in a flat, toneless voice. "Is anything wrong?" said John. "Oh, no. All is in order," said Dave Spear. "I heard this noise the other night, Mr. Barter, when I was calling out the other people around here. All is quite regular. No one is being tortured. Oh, no, nothing is wrong. It's only an old woman who can't afford any comfort dying of cancer. I can even tell you, gentlemen, her name. Her name is Tiddy Petherton. She is not... Yes, Tiddy. T-I-T-T-I-E. I'm not making that up. She is not entirely unhappy in spite of that sound, for her only fear is to die in the hospital. She'll be in the hospital now if the vicar didn't pay anyone to look after her. I've been in there. I've seen her. And though she can't help making those noises, her mind is reasonably satisfied. She has no fear of death. All she fears is the hospital. Our good cousin Philip would have sent her there, too, if the vicar hadn't come to her rescue. Oh, no, gentlemen, all is quite in order." "Aren't you making rather too much of one sad case, Spear?" said Barter. Dave Spear gripped the gate with both his hands and began to shake it. This proceeding arrests the full attention of John, was one who always took note of such manifestations of sudden feeling. "Besides, my good sir," Barter went on, "your communistic state wouldn't prevent people from getting cancer." A curious thing occurred then. Or at least to the insatiable nervous attention of John it was curious. For it was that this short, broad-shouldered, sturdy little man, without any overcoat and in a neat, navy blue suit of serge, spoke in a voice like the voice of a terrible prophet. John, for his part, never forgot that moment. He was himself standing close to his friend Barter. He even had his arm around over Barter's shoulder, and the smell of Barter's leather coat was in his nostrils. But what he kept his eyes upon as he stood like that was a broken corbel that must once have supported some kind of stone shaft, belonging perhaps to a vanished archway between these ruined house and another house. This disfigured fragment of stone came to resemble, as John gazed at it, a face whose eyes were at the end of its snout. Maybe it was a face once, he thought. A gargoyle face, deliberately carved by some mad workman in those old days to ease his mind of some frightful thing. Every time that this moaning sound from the interior of the house came again, an invisible hand upon his twitching cheek seemed to turn his face toward the petrified snout endowed with eyes. "Come now, Spear, that really is going a bit too far," were the words that lay like a tedious, meaningless scripture upon the counter, so to speak, of Tom Barter's practical mouth. But he could not utter them in a convincing tone. "Come now, Spear," he began again, and then he flung out, "going a bit too far," and then his voice could be heard in a stage aside. "Now, Spear, that really is." "Pleasure we get from chaos," Spear was saying, "is not a path upon the pleasure we get of reducing chaos to order. Life will never be really pruned and clipped and trimmed, whatever we do to it. It will always brim over and escape us. The communistic state is the only way that's ever been found for using force on the side of the weak. The whole system of human life depends on two things, on work and on pain. Communism takes our power of work and our power of bearing pain and puts these two, like the immortal words of Achilles, horses of Achilles, into the harness of the state. Politics are intolerable to all sensitive people. Well, why are they so? Because they don't touch the real quick, the real nerve, the real ganglia of the situation. The situation is not political, it is economic. If it wants to be, it isn't want of a Napoleon. It's want of a world machine, run by impersonal force on behalf of the weak. When I say weak, I mean the poor and the children of the poor. Money is strength, power, comfort, leisure, thought, philosophy, art, healthy, liberty, freedom, faith, hope, rest, rest. Peace, rest. Money is sleep. Money is love. Money is ease from pain. Those who deny this are lower than men of higher than men. They are rogues or madmen. They are liars or madmen. They are fools or madmen. Money is the blood of life. Life is created out of work and pain. Life is dependent by force. The communist state is the organized force of humanity. Evolution has been fumbling, groping, staggering, through blood, through tears, through torture, to this organizing of human force to human ends. Evolution has created money, and it has created the communistic state to monopolize money. Money, the engine of life, is an engine of death when it is in the hands of individuals. Put it in the hands of the communist state, and whatever blunders are committed, the whole situation is transformed. The individual has no more right to own money than he has to own earth, air, water, fire. We are all of a herd of gibbering monkeys in a madhouse of inherited superstitions. And the maddest and wickedest of all these superstitions is the idea that private people have a right to be rich. No one has a right to be rich. It is a crime to be rich. It is a perversion and obscenity and monstrosity. It is an offense against nature, against intelligence, against good taste. To be rich is to be a moral leper. To be rich is to be on the side of cancer. "A bit too far, Spear," came the voice of Barter, like the sound of a rain gutter dipping in a tin roof. I wish Mary could have heard that, thought John, and he found himself taking his arm from his friend's shoulder and feeling a certain nausea for the smell of the leather jacket. His nerves were so much on edge at that moment that, as Barter quietly unlatched the gate and let himself through, he burst out as if they had been alone. "Don't forget, Tom, that if you get fed up with Philip, Garrett wouldn't willingly take you over. You only have to say the word. Only to say it, Tom." Oh, what perfect timing. We're at the end of that chapter. The next one will be Garrett of Glastonbury tomorrow. But until next time, I'll see you in Glastonbury. Cheers.